I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
February, a month dedicated to Black history. A month to remember about the harsh treatments of Black Americans, from violent abuse to actual killings. This lasted during the 1800s all the way to the late 1980s, where Black Americans were finally granted the same privilege as white Americans, thanks to Martin Luther King. The discrimination has dated back during the Revolutionary War, where the British has came to America and began to import black slaves from Africa to work the agricultural fields. It was during Bacon's Revolution during the American Civil War where the discrimination began to arise. Discrimination includes the Jim Crow law, implying that blacks and whites are to be separated from one another. Back then, signs labeling whites only and coloreds only were used to separate blacks and whites. However, many Black Americans felt that the Jim Crow laws were unfair. Many movements began to start in order to achieve equilibrium and the same rights as white Americans. People like Martin Luther King, Webb Du Bois, Malcolm X, and many more. However, these big figures tend to focus more on politics and movements. But there were others that faced discrimination in their own creative ways. Examples of these individuals are Gordon Parks, who, as a young boy, faced many discrimination and was living off the streets. It was while growing up was where Gordon Parks' name really began to shine. He combated discrimination using a creative method, art, more specifically photography. But it wasn't just Gordon Parks. Oh no. For today, we'll be focusing on another photographer. Her name is Nikki McComb.
Welcome to the Gordon Parks Gallery. My name is Professor Erica Rasmussen and I direct the gallery here. Today we are going to take a look at the exhibition taken by North Minneapolis resident Nikki McComb. Let me tell you a little bit about Nikki. Nikki is an activist and a photographer. She works much in the vein of Gordon Parks himself, in that she takes her camera out into the street and makes work that's important to her about her community. She even considers herself what she calls an artivist. That would be a combination of an artist and an activist. The whole of this show began with this particular photograph called My Mother. And the way that this came about went something like this. She knew this woman who's portrayed in the photograph, who recently had lost her mother to stray gunfire in her neighborhood. And so she had this woman hold up a photograph, of course it says, "That was my mother." And what she did was she put it on Facebook. No one knew who was responsible for the shot that killed her mother. And so she asked people, if you know something, say something. And you know what? In time, people came forward. They went to the family and they told them who they thought was responsible. That eventually led to a conviction and an arrest. These two particular pieces, called Choices and Choices 2, are not products of street photography, but rather they were staged by the artist herself. She used two young boys that she knew from her community to set up a tableau. And what she did was she dangled guns from fish line from above and had the boys look at them in different ways, interact, In this particular one, she had an adult or a parent hold a set of books in front of the children, suggesting that they have choices of their own to make in life. Are they going to strive for education and a life well lived, or are they going to turn to guns and pursue a life of crime? This particular piece is called Bullying is for Losers. And what McComb did was she went into a high school and she had young men from her community hold up signs of individuals that they knew of the same age group that took their lives due to bullying. She does this, of course, to bring attention, heartbreaking attention, to the fact that bullying can have devastating effects. And she tries in her own methods to combat those challenges in our community. In this series, along this wall, McComb explores some staggering percentages, some numbers about what guns in communities do to individuals. It's blatant here. It's in your face. There's no argument here. She wrote on the backs or on the skins of people that she knows. For instance, you can't refute this. More than half of women killed by guns were killed by their partners. She's helping to spread the word. She's raising consciousness about these terrible things. Similarly, per 1,000 men killed by guns, 30% look like us. Again, in your face, she's telling us that the African American community is suffering more than most communities because of handguns. These are decommissioned gun parts that were sold off by the city of Minneapolis. These guns were most likely originally used in some sort of criminal proceedings. Then they are cut up, the police department sells them, and what Nikki McComb does is she offers these gun pieces to artists and asks them to make something beautiful with these instruments of death.